I arrived in the city on a Tuesday that didn't seem to know what kind of day it wanted to be. The sky pulsed between three shades of gray, each one humming its own thin note in the back of my mind. C sharp, then something like a low violet, then a dusty silver just flat enough to feel tired. I've lived with synesthesia my whole life, but new cities always overwhelm me. They're too full of sounds I haven't learned yet, colors I don't know the names of, emotions that hit before people even speak. I dragged my suitcase down a narrow street of old brick warehouses converted into apartments. Every footstep I took a code in a pale mint tone. My breath made faint flashes of yellow. Even the distant traffic throbbed in soft gradients. I should have felt anxious, but I didn't. After everything I'd left behind, anything unfamiliar felt like relief. I had moved here because of heartbreak, the kind that rearranges the architecture of your life. Someone I loved once told me I experienced the world too intensely. He said it jokingly at first, then said it again when he was frustrated, then said it again when he decided I was too much work. I tried to turn myself down for him, softer, quieter, dimmer. But dimming myself made me feel like I was disappearing. When it was finally over, I packed the bare essentials and left before I could change my mind. The city was supposed to be temporary, a limbo space where I could relearn the sound of my own thoughts. Instead, I found something entirely different. On my first night, after unpacking just enough to pretend I lived there, I stepped outside to feel the air. The weather here changes like it's in conversation with itself. Mist rolling down one block, heat rising from another, a soft drizzle falling only on certain corners. But what I noticed wasn't the weather. It was a sound I had no memory of hearing before. A low hum that glowed in my mind as a shifting teal. It wasn't coming from traffic, or people, or anything natural. I followed it without thinking. The sound led me into a wide, open plaza tucked between the old factories. At first I thought I was dreaming. Colors were moving across buildings. Huge, swirling images projected onto brick walls, reacting to the slightest noise around me. People clapped, and the colors burst like fireworks. Someone laughed, and the green shifted into delicate golden threads. Even footsteps created ripples of light. The light parade. I had heard the term once years ago, but never thought it was real. But here it was. An entire district alive with projected visuals and reactive pigments. A nightly gathering of artists who treated the city like a living canvas. I stood in the middle of it all, rooted, overwhelmed, awestruck. The colors made sound in me. They sang, they whispered, they flickered, they braided emotion through tone. Then I noticed him. A man stood in front of one of the larger walls, tilting his head the way artists do when they're listening to something only they can hear. He was wearing a paint-splattered hoodie and black gloves with the fingertips cut off. Curly hair fell across his forehead in shapes that caught the blue light. He didn't look amazed by the projections. He looked like he knew them intimately. I tried not to stare. I failed. He must have noticed, because he turned slightly and gave me a small, curious smile. "You new around here?" he asked. His voice appeared in my mind as a warm, amber honey shape. "Just moved in yesterday," I said. "Good timing. Light parade season just started." He nodded toward the glowing wall. "You picked a hell of a night to explore." I stepped closer, drawn not only to him, but to the mural behind him. It wasn't like the others. It wasn't just reacting to the projected lights. It was generating something of its own. Bands of shimmering pigment twisted and released faint sparks, like the mural had a heartbeat. "What is this?" I asked. "It's mine," he said. "Phosphorescent pigments. Some react to UV, some to infrared, some to frequencies you can't see without equipment. It's glowing in harmonics." I whispered before I realized I'd spoken. He turned fully then, eyes bright with sudden interest. "Harmonics." I hesitated. I always hesitate. people don't usually know what to do with synesthesia. I hear colors, I finally said, and see sound. His expression didn't shift toward confusion or pity. Instead, it sharpened with fascination. You have synesthesia. I do. That must make this place wild. It's beautiful, I said, feeling small under the confession. He grinned. Then, you're seeing this mural better than anyone else here? I watched the mural again, letting the pigments settle in my vision. The colors broke apart into floating tones, soft glass chimes, muted metallic hums, a subtle silver tremor that reminded me of the sound a wine glass makes when you run a finger along the rim. It sounds like crystal, I said. His jaw relaxed just slightly. That's exactly what I hoped someone would say. I blinked. Really? I mix paint like it's a musical composition, he said. Temperature, humidity, light source, surface density, everything's part of the rhythm. I felt a smile tug at my lips. I mix sound the same way. He looked at me for a moment, long enough that I felt warm beneath it. I'm Jonna, he said. Heliot, he repeated, tasting the syllables. Nice name. I pretended not to feel the flush that rose in my chest, but the color appeared anyway. Soft coral, spreading behind my ribs. We drifted along the wall together, studying his work in easy silence. I wasn't usually this comfortable with strangers, but there was something familiar about Jonna. Like he made space for the world, instead of trying to flatten it. What do you do? He asked finally. I'm a sound engineer. Mostly installations and film, sometimes albums. No wonder you ended up here. This district is crawling with people who turn art into something you feel under your skin. I think that's the only kind I like, I said. Same. When the light parade wound down and the projectors dimmed, most people drifted away. Jonna began packing up his brushes, tucking them into a beat-up canvas bag. He glanced at me. You coming back tomorrow? I surprised myself with how quickly I nodded. Yeah, I think I will. Good. I want to show you what the mural does when the air warms up around midnight. That sounds amazing. He smiled again, smaller this time, more personal. Then I'll see you tomorrow, Iliad. He slung the bag over his shoulder and walked off into the twilight haze. I watched the glow around him fade into the soft blue street lamps until he disappeared into the curve of the alley. I stood alone in front of the mural, feeling a vibration settle through me. A soft note of anticipation, threaded with light. The pigments on the wall murmured in faint shifting tones, almost as if saying goodbye. I'd only been in the city for a day, but already something inside me felt reawakened. Not just the part of me that loved art, not just the part that heard color, but the part of me that believed I might still be capable of connection. Tomorrow, I knew, the colors would sound different, because I would be listening for Jonna. I spent the entire next day drifting through my new apartment like my mind was somewhere else entirely. I tried unpacking, but every sound, the rip of tape, the clatter of dishes, the thud of books hitting shelves, ignited streaks of color that reminded me of the night before. Soft turquoise, amber gold, the crystalline shimmer of Jonna's mural. And beneath it all was the memory of his voice, warm and steady, glowing like a quiet fire in the cold parts of my chest. By late afternoon I gave up pretending to be productive. I found myself glancing at the clock every few minutes, waiting for the sun to dip, waiting for the district to light up again, waiting for Jonna. It wasn't romantic, not exactly. It felt more like anticipation mixed with recognition, like hearing a chord progression you've never listened to but somehow know by heart. When the sky finally darkened into its moody blue, I headed out. As soon as I turned onto the plaza street, the colors returned, dancing across the buildings like they'd been holding their breath all day. The light parade buzzed with more people tonight. Tourists, artists, kids chasing beams of light with sticky hands. Every footstep around me triggered ripples of soft gold. Every laugh shimmered in tiny sparks. And Jonah was there. He was kneeling near the wall, adjusting one of the small UV projectors he'd rigged beneath the mural. His hoodie was different tonight, dark green, but still speckled with paint. When he saw me, he stood up with a grin that flashed a warm tone in my mind, something like aged copper. "You came back," he said. "Couldn't stay away." He chuckled. "Good. I wanted to show you something." He tapped the projector with his foot. "This one warms up slowly. And when it hits the right wavelength," he pointed to a section of mural painted in what looked like faint, chalky white, "this part wakes up. Like it's alive." Exactly. We waited in silence as the light deepened, and then, slowly, the paint began to glow. First in soft, drifting ripples, then in more vibrant waves, until the wall looked like it was breathing. I sucked in a breath. "It sounds like water." "No, like water moving under glass." Jonah's eyes softened. "I've never had anyone tell me what it sounds like to them. This is amazing." There was no embarrassment, no discomfort in his voice, just delight, real unguarded delight. It disarmed me completely. I noticed then that Jonah didn't just watch the mural. He watched me watching it. As if the way I experienced his work mattered just as much as the work itself. We wandered along the wall again, drifting into a natural rhythm of conversation. "How long have you been doing this?" I asked. "Painting." "Since I was a kid. These pigments, though the last few years. I started experimenting when my grandmother got sick, and I had to stay home more." His tone shifted. Not sad, but quieter. "She lives with me now," he said. "Needs care most days. And the neighborhood's, well, conservative is the polite word. I'm guessing not the easiest place to be yourself." "Not even a little." Jonah's mouth curved in a wry half smile. "She's wonderful though. She knows about me. Always has. But some neighbors think I'm—" He waved a hand as if dismissing the whole thought. "Suspicious. Too artsy. Too unmarried. Too everything." I frowned. "That's ridiculous." He shrugged. "They don't need much of a reason to dislike someone. Does it bother you?" "More than I admit." He paused. "But being here at night helps. The city feels bigger. Possible. Like I can breathe without checking if someone's watching." I didn't know what to say for a moment. I understood the feeling more deeply than I expected. Not about neighbors, but about shrinking myself for someone else's comfort. About being afraid of taking up too much space. We walked a few more steps in silence before Jonah nudged me lightly with his elbow. "What about you?" he asked. "What'd you move here?" "Needed a reset," I said. He waited for more. "I was with someone for a long time. He liked my talent but not the way it worked. Told me I was too much. Too intense. Too sensitive." Jonah's eyebrows furrowed. "Sensitive is not a flaw." It was to him. "Then he wasn't your person." His voice was so matter of fact that it hit me like a small emotional earthquake. I felt something warm and tight flare behind my ribs. Before I could respond, Jonah knelt to adjust a second projector. As he leaned forward, a faint line of pink light flickered across the mural. But the projector hadn't turned on yet. "Did you see that?" he asked. I did. It was triggered by sound. Sound? What sound? I replayed the moment internally. "Your knee hitting the ground. That's not enough to activate." He stopped as the pigment sparked again, responding to a nearby burst of laughter. Jonah stood slowly, staring at the wall with a look I could only describe as wonder. "This shouldn't be happening yet," he murmured. "It means the whole system is warming up faster than it should. And that's good." "That's incredible." He turned to me. "And I think it's reacting to your voice specifically." "My voice?" "I swear I'm not making this up," he said. "Say something." I swallowed, then said softly, "Jonah." The wall shimmered in soft pink waves, blooming outward like a watercolor soaking through paper. Jonah pressed a hand over his heart. "Oh my God. You're a walking catalyst." I laughed, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. Is that a compliment? A massive one. For a while we played with the wall like kids discovering a new toy. I spoke different words. The mural responded. Jonah hummed. The colors flared. People around us began to notice. Someone asked if it was an official part of the night's installation. Jonah said no, but he didn't stop smiling. At one point he said, "I've been wanting to work with someone who understands sound this way. Someone who doesn't just hear it, but feels it. And I've wanted to collaborate with a visual artist who builds emotion into light," I replied. He grinned. "So we're doing this?" "Yeah," I said, surprising myself with how certain I felt. "We're doing this." We spent the next hour brainstorming a project, something hidden, something reactive, something that would link light and sound across multiple walls. Jonah had a studio tucked behind an abandoned loading dock. I had portable recording gear that could trigger frequencies his pigments loved. The idea came together faster than I expected. He sketched. I described tone shapes. Colors bloomed on the mural in response, weaving our thoughts into light. The more we talked, the closer we stood. And the closer we stood, the more I noticed things I shouldn't have. Like the faint smell of turpentine on his clothes, waiting to unfold. The warm timbre his voice carried when he said my name. The way the corner of his mouth curled when he was thinking. But just as I felt myself sinking into the moment, someone shouted from across the plaza, "Jonah." We turned. A woman stood near the entrance of the alley, arms crossed, expression sharp with suspicion, waiting to unfold. I could tell instantly she belonged to the neighborhood Jonah had described. The kind of neighbor who monitored everyone else's life, like it was her unpaid job. "Grandma's asking for you," she called. She said she can't find her inhaler bar. Jonah's smile vanished. I told her I'd be close by, he muttered, already gathering his bag. The woman's eyes flicked to me. Cold. Assessing, not subtle. "You're still out here painting?" she asked Jonah. "At this hour? With strangers?" Jonah forced a polite smile. "He's not a stranger, but..." Her gaze hardened. "He is to me." Then she disappeared down the alley. Jonah pressed a hand to his forehead. "I'm sorry about that." "You don't have to apologize. She thinks the worst of everything, and she watches me like a hawk. I'm pretty sure she's waiting for proof that I'm doing something sinful or dangerous or..." He trailed off, frustrated. "You're painting colors on a wall," I said softly. "Not breaking into a bank. Don't be too sure. Around there. Painting colors on a wall might be the bigger crime." He looked embarrassed, and I hated that for him. "Go check on your grandmother," I said gently. "I will. But..." He hesitated. "Come back tomorrow." "Of course." He gave me one last look, soft, lingering, almost apologetic, and rushed into the alley. I stood alone again in front of the mural, watching the pigments settle into their quiet, crystalline glow. But tonight, the colors sounded different. They sounded like worry, like something fragile beginning to tremble under pressure. And beneath that, something else, something warmer, something undeniable, waiting for tomorrow. The city smelled of wet asphalt and electricity that night, a storm rolling in faster than the weather report had promised. I walked toward the plaza, carrying my portable recorder and a bag of cables, feeling the low hum of anticipation vibrate through me in deep indigo. Jonah had promised the installation tonight would be the largest yet. Every mural we had worked on, across the city, linked in one symphony of light and sound. And I was terrified. I arrived at the first wall, the one beneath the bridge, where rain had begun to streak the brick in thin rivulets. Jonah was there already, crouched by a tangle of cords, his hoodie plastered to his shoulders from the drizzle. The wet strands of his hair clung to his forehead, and for a moment I just froze, because he looked luminous. Not just the murals around him, the way he moved, checking projectors, adjusting sensors, muttering frequencies under his breath. It made the air feel thick with possibility. Elliot, he said, glancing up, eyes wide. You made it. Good. You too, I said, voice shaking slightly, though the colors of my words were bright, electric, gold, sapphire, a thin ribbon of crimson that pulsed in time with my heartbeat. Jonah laughed softly. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wouldn't miss this, I admitted, setting down my bag and kneeling to check one of the sound triggers. The rain dripped onto my fingers, sending small flashes of chartreuse across the wall. This is going to be beautiful, Da. Beautiful, Jonah repeated, almost like testing the word, like he needed to say it aloud to convince himself. He brushed water from the lens of a projector. It has to be. I've never done anything like this before, not for so many walls, not for anyone. The words struck me in a way I didn't expect. I wanted to tell him I understood. I wanted to tell him that I felt the same, that what we were doing together wasn't just art. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not with the storm humming through the city, like a living thing, rattling street signs and shaking cables loose. The first flash of lightning lit the sky. A crack of thunder followed, sending a vibration across my chest in sharp, blue pulses. I jumped slightly. Jonah glanced at me, eyes narrowing in both amusement and concern. You okay? He asked. Yeah, I said, though my hands still shook slightly. The storm always made my perception spike. Every flash, every boom. Every drop of water seemed to carry color and tone in perfect harmony, sometimes too much to bear. But also sometimes it made me feel more alive than I had in years. Jonah's attention was already back on the wall. We need to reroute the power. Some of the sensors are getting wet. I crouched beside him, my fingers brushing his as I adjusted a cable. The contact was electric. A small ribbon of copper, gold ran up my arm, and I froze, suddenly hyper, aware of how close we were. My pulse quickened, and the rain seemed to fade around us, replaced by a private storm. You're shaking, Jonah said softly. It's the storm, I muttered, hoping he wouldn't notice the way my chest felt, like it was vibrating against his. Or maybe it's something else, he said, leaning a little closer. His breath was warm on my cheek. My synesthesia jumped, colors and sounds colliding in a brilliant, dizzying cascade of magenta sparks, a hum of pure violet, threads of silver that seemed to spiral around us. I swallowed. Maybe. We worked in silence, each of us hyper, focused on the installation, but the closeness between us made the air hum, in a way neither of us could ignore. Every accidental brush of hands, every shared glance, set off streaks of color in my vision that were almost painful in their intensity. Okay, ready, Jonah said finally, standing back, drenched but triumphant. Once I start the triggers, it should cascade across the city. All murals, all walls, lights and sound. I nodded, my fingers finding the portable controller. Let's do it. The first mural pulsed. Colors spread like liquid fire across the brick. Jonah's pigments responded perfectly, activated by the frequencies I had designed. A deep green shimmer rolled across the wall, followed by bursts of ruby and sapphire. The air vibrated, the city itself seeming to hum along with us. Then the power flickered. My stomach dropped. A quick glance at the control panel revealed it blackouts. The storm had struck harder than we anticipated. Crap, Jonah muttered. Some circuits are down. We might lose the whole cascade. I swallowed hard. We can fix it. We have to. We dove into the tangle of cables, slipping in puddles and twisting wires beneath wet eaves. My hands brushed his more than once, sending sparks of color flaring across my vision. Every accidental touch felt magnified, intimate, dangerous. Elliot, Jonah started, voice low. His eyes met mine in a way that made my chest tighten. We can do this, I said, mostly to convince myself. My hand found his again as I handed him a spare wire, and for a heartbeat, the world fell away. Rain, thunder, the murmuring city. Nothing existed but him and me. The pulse of color and sound between us. The quiet energy that refused to be ignored. His hand lingered over mine. I could feel the tremor in him, just as I felt it in myself. Then a flash of lightning lit the plaza, and thunder rattled across the buildings like a drum. We jumped apart, both of us laughing nervously, hearts hammering. Almost happened, Jonna said, voice tight but grinning. Yeah, I said, trying to catch my breath. Almost. We worked through the blackout, rerouting power, manually activating sound triggers. Every time a section lit up, every time a wall pulsed, I felt a thrill that had nothing to do with the storm or the murals. It was the knowledge that we were doing this together, that I was here, that he was here. Finally, after what felt like hours, the installation was active citywide. Every mural shimmered and bloomed in response to our sound triggers, a web of color rippling through brick and fog. The storm hadn't stopped the magic. It had only made it more dramatic. Rain streaked across glowing walls, refracting light in diamonds. People gathered in the streets, their umbrellas catching flashes of crimson, amber, cobalt, and jade. They cheered, laughed, and clapped as if they understood some unspoken symphony that only a few of us knew existed. Jonna and I stood side by side, drenched and exhausted, watching the city bloom. Look at that, he said. I couldn't speak for a moment. My chest ached, not just from adrenaline, but from something else, something tender and terrifying. It's perfect. He turned to me, rain running down his face, dripping from his curls. You're perfect, he said suddenly. My pulse spiked. My synesthesia exploded into violet flames and copper streaks that made my knees weak. I wanted to tell him, to reach for him, to cross the gap that had been narrowing all night. But the storm, the city, the noise, it all made the moment impossible to contain, impossible to act on without risk. Kai? I started, then stopped. M2, he said, laughing softly, almost embarrassed by his own confession. Almost. But not quite. We stood there, shoulders brushing, sharing a quiet awareness that words couldn't capture. It was intimate. It was electric. It was terrifying. The city rumbled with thunder. People clapped. Colors shimmered across wet walls. And for the first time in years, I felt safe in the storm. Safe with someone who understood not just my art, but my senses, my fears, my pulse. Jonna glanced at me, eyes softening. Tomorrow, he whispered. Tomorrow, I agreed, though I knew that the memory of this night, the almost touch, the almost confession, the almost love, would stay with me forever, glowing faintly behind my eyelids like one of our hidden pigments. And I knew, without a doubt, that it wasn't just the murals that were alive, it was us. The city seemed different the morning after the storm. The streets glistened with wet reflections, the sun splitting into shards of gold and rose across puddles. I walked slowly, savoring the colors, the small hums and vibrations in the air that only I could hear. The murals were still alive in my memory, a symphony of pigments and sound that had felt bigger than the city itself, and yet intimately ours. When I arrived at the first mural of the night, the one beneath the bridge, I was surprised to see a small crowd lingering. Some people had brought cameras, some were just staring, quietly, at the streaks of color that still shimmered faintly under the morning light. I realized then that what Jonna and I had created wasn't just an art installation. It was a memory etched into the city, a pulse that continued even after the storm. And then I saw him. Jonna emerged from a side alley, umbrella in hand, hair plastered but smile intact. His eyes met mine, and I swear the light in the morning bent just for him, sparkling like the hidden pigments he loved. He waved, small and private, as though acknowledging a secret shared between us and the walls themselves. Morning, he said, his voice a soft chord in my chest. Morning, I replied. The color of his voice spread across me. Warm amber, soft violet. A shimmer of teal that made me dizzy in the best way. We didn't need to talk much. Words had almost failed us the night before. But now, standing in the quiet aftermath, everything felt calmer, realer. I reached for his hand. This time intentionally, and he took it, fingers intertwining with mine. The connection was quiet but undeniable, a steady hum beneath all the chaos we'd just endured. The city remembers, I said, nodding toward the murals. I can see it in how people are looking at them. Even in daylight, even without the storm, even without the full soundscape, it's still alive. Jonah squeezed my hand. Yeah, and so are we, I think. We wandered together along the walls, checking on small reactions in the pigments. Rainwater had settled into cracks, reflecting sunlight in unexpected ways. Colors flickered faintly under frequencies only I could hear. And I realized that part of me had changed the night before, was still changing. I wasn't just a spectator anymore. I was a participant, a collaborator, a witness to both the art and to Jonah's truth. Eventually, we reached the plaza where it had all begun. People were leaving, walking off into the city's shifting light. Some stopping to smile at us as if they knew something private. The neighbor, who had once glared at Jonah the night we worked together, now stood hesitating, umbrella tilted, watching the murals. I could see her expression soften, the rigidity in her eyes giving way to curiosity. Even she, it seemed, could feel the quiet pulse of what we had created. Jonah looked at me then, and I could see the weight he had carried. Years of hiding, of pretending, of fear, beginning to lift. His smile was small but resolute, a declaration without words. I don't have to hide anymore, he said softly. You never did, really, I told him. I just think you didn't always have someone who could see you. We stood there in silence, holding hands, letting the morning warmth seep into our bones. I realized that love didn't have to announce itself. It didn't have to be loud or dramatic or public to exist. Sometimes it glowed quietly, in shared glances, in whispered confessions, in the pulse of color, between two people brave enough to create something together. Do you want to keep working on the murals? I asked, tilting my head toward the walls. He laughed softly, a sound that felt like liquid copper in my ears. Always. But now I think I can work without fear. And maybe with someone who gets it, someone who sees everything the way I see it. I squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth echo across me. I'll follow you anywhere. The city around us continued to shift, clouds rolling past the sun, wind brushing through empty streets, faint echoes of the storm, still humming in the corners of brick and glass. But I no longer felt small in it, no longer felt fragile in the face of everything that had come before. I felt luminous, in a quiet way, just like the pigments on Jonah's walls, just like the colors that danced across the city that night. And as we walked side by side, hand in hand, I realized that some lights don't need storms to shine. They just need people willing to notice, people willing to create together, people willing to reach for each other, even when almost everything in the world tells them not to. I glanced at Jonah, and he glanced back at me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely seen. Not just in the colors I heard, or the sounds I saw, or the art that pulsed between us, but in every quiet, luminous part of me that had been waiting for someone who would listen, and feel, and stay. And in the city of shifting light, in the aftermath of a storm, I knew that we were just beginning.